And is it a problem that you should be concerned about for your baby? The thing is that I am seeing more and more babies that are having difficulties with feeding, that are having reflux, that have difficulties with sleeping. Lots and lots of babies I'm seeing in my classes have an open mouth resting posture. And all of those things can potentially lead to or mean that your baby might have a tongue tie. And what a tongue tie is that we all have a frenulum underneath our tongue. So you can see that little band of tissue. Sometimes that is too far forward. So it's literally tying the tip of your tongue to the floor of your mouth, so you can't even move your tongue. Sometimes it's too short, sometimes it's too thick, and sometimes it's just really inflexible. So it's not allowing your tongue to do the movement that it needs to do in your mouth. Ideally, your tongue has a very good range of motion. So it can go up, down, side to side, out, and back in. Okay. And the thing is that for babies, they need their tongue. Let me see if I can use my little friend over here. Their tongue needs to be moving efficiently. Of course, I can't figure out how to get the tongue moving properly inside the mouth. Obviously, your baby's tongue is not hanging out all the way. This is a new toy that I just had made. And so the thing is that your tongue, your baby's tongue, needs to kind of move in this sort of rhythmical, undulating movement up towards the palate. It has to compress the breast or the bottle so that the milk can be extracted. So that tongue needs to move out and up and back, out, up, back, so that it's really kind of pushing against the palate in order to pump and squeeze that breast or that bottle to get the milk out. Now, the thing is that when you have a baby that has a tongue that is potentially, or a frenulum, that little band of tissue under your tongue that is potentially too short, too thick, or too tight, or too far forward, meaning that they don't have that good range of motion that I just showed you, their tongue is not moving. And so what happens is ultimately they start to do a lot of this munching and chomping to try to squeeze the breast to get the milk out, because that tongue cannot move properly, okay? So it cannot get that same seal, suction, and vacuum to get that milk out of the breast or the bottle. Now, with a bottle, it is slightly easier because if you tilt the bottle, the milk will come out whether there's compression or not. I think that they are making some bottles where it still requires some compression, which is great. But the thing is that that tongue is not moving. There's going to be various different difficulties and symptoms, I guess, that you could say that your baby might have or that you might have that might be indicative that the tongue is not working properly. Now, some of the things for babies include things like if you have a baby who has some pretty significant weight loss after birth, or they're just not gaining weight appropriately. Infant fatigue. So if they're sucking for about 1 to 2 minutes and then they like fall asleep at the breast or the bottle, they may seem to be better on the bottle, but again, we really want to make sure that it's not just because the bottle is just dripping milk out, right? They're fatiguing because it's so effortful for them to be sucking that milk out and for them to be compressing the breast or the breast to get that milk out. If your baby has that milky tongue, so like that white residue on the tongue, especially in the back, it means that they're not clearing their tongue against the palate, so that tongue is not able to move up to the palate. You might hear a clicking or very noisy feeding sound. So feeding should actually be pretty quiet, to be quite honest. When baby gets that good suck, swallow, breathe rhythm going, you should not be able to hear them breathing very, very hard or any kind of clicking or gurgling or anything like that. If they have difficulty with bottle feeding, or if they're slow at feeding, or if there's leaking, whether from the bottle or from the breast, if there's milk dribbling down all the time, that could be a sign that the latch is not great. There's not a good seal around the breast, and that might be because the tongue is not working properly. Gassy babies, babies that have reflux, babies that are frequently feeding. So you can have tongue-tied babies who eat a lot and who eat frequently, which can often lead to oversupply. So you might not even realize. But you can also have a fast flow and your baby feeds more quickly, but more frequently. And the thing is that they're getting that flow without a lot of work. So they don't actually have to use their tongue. So it sometimes gets missed that there's a tongue tie. But the thing is that they're eating all the time. Because they're actually getting more of that fore milk, that sugary kind of milk versus the fattier milk that comes later that they really have to work harder for. They stop feeding before that because your flow is just so fast that they don't really have to work for it. And then they're like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to work anymore. And I'm going to feed an hour later. Some symptoms that might be indicative that your baby has a tongue tie is things, sort of symptoms for mom: painful or difficult latch, delayed or low milk production, early supplementation. If you had to do sort of early supplementation, that might be because your baby is not extracting that milk properly. Nipple trauma, creased nipples, bleeding, cracked nipples, even the fact that you're just feeling like something is wrong. Maybe your milk supply was great, and now at like 8 to 12 weeks old, your baby is starting to get fussy at the breast, and it seems like maybe you have some lower milk supply happening. And you're starting to wonder, like, why? What happened? It could be because your baby is not using their tongue properly. That might be because your baby has a tight or too short or too thick frenum or frenulum under their tongue. It could also be that it's too far forward, so it's really tying that tongue down. The other thing I want to mention, though, is that it's not just about the tongue. Sometimes you have a lip tie over here. In here, there's also a frenum, and there's buccal ties in here and here. And so if you run your finger in your baby's mouth, if you notice any restrictions in those areas and it's not easy to run your finger through those, then it's very possible that your baby has some tightness. And that tightness is often due because the fascia is tight, but also there might actually be that tissue that's too tight or too thick. And that's when we need to sort of look at getting on the whole sort of path of assessing your baby for tongue tie. The thing is that your doctor is not going to be assessing your baby and not going to be able to do a good enough assessment by just looking in the mouth. Oh, no, I don't see anything. That's often what happens, which is just ridiculous. You have to feel inside the mouth. You have to move that tongue. You have to see if that tongue is moving side to side, up and down, out and in. And it's not just the movement out that matters. As you saw, we really need that movement. Oh gosh, let's just get this tongue tie opened. We really need that tongue to be coming up to the palate. And ideal resting posture when we're awake and especially when we're asleep is lips closed, tongue up to the roof of the mouth. So it's suctioned up to the palate. And that shapes the palate. That shapes the width of your palate. That stimulates all of the cranial nerves that are in your palate. When you have a high arched palate, that means the tongue is not getting up there to really shape the palate and can lead to so many other issues. Now, this might be because of a tongue tie. It might also be because your baby has tightness somewhere else in their body. It might be a combination of the two. It might be one or the other. Often with a tongue tie, there is always body tightness, but you don't always have a tongue tie even if you have body tightness. So I hope that makes sense. But the thing is that our tongue is actually a group of 8 muscles that all connect down here into the hyoid, which also connects all sorts of other muscles. There's a little bone in your throat here around that Adam's apple area. And if any of those muscles are tight, or any of the muscles underneath the hyoid bone, all through here, if any of that is tight, that's going to be pulling the tongue muscles down, which means that you're going to have a low resting tongue posture. It's going to be hard to do that moving up to the palate, hard to do the moving side to side, hard to do the moving out and in, because those muscles are being tied down in a way. They're being pulled down because of body tightness. So really getting body work done. I always recommend craniosacral therapy or osteopathy for your baby. Even if you're not really sure, just go and get at least one session to just start releasing some of these things. which can really help, but also getting a full intraoral in the mouth assessment, either by a pediatric dentist or a speech language pathologist or an occupational therapist who have all been trained in tethered oral tissues or tongue, lip, cheek ties. That's what the grouping is called, tethered oral tissues or TOTS. And you really want to make sure that who you're going to has additional training in this area, because this is not taught in school. This is additional professional development. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I do offer one-to-one support if you're in the Burlington area. And if you want to just learn more about this, I have a free group that you can come and feel free to join us. The links are all along with this video. And let me know. Talk to you all